Hi, this is Mr. Glazer. We're going to talk about the Homestead Act today during the 1860s. So, while industrialization and urbanization and cities are built in the east, on the west side, American settlers start coming over. But there's a reason, there has to be something to push them, or pull them rather, that direction, and that's going to be the Homestead Act. We'll get there in just a second, though. So, over west, Americans are going to go through a region called the Great Plains. That's more on the western side of the United States, kind of more in the middle west area, as I showed you last time. But the Great Plains is going to be this big, wide open, dry area that we also call the frontier. So as we see, the grass is this golden brown color, so we know it's dry, it's hot. If it's this color, and as we see in the field over here, there's not a lot of water. There's not a lot of water sources. We imagine it doesn't rain a lot. There's droughts here a lot of the time. So because of that, there's not a lot of growth. You see in the photo that there's not a lot of green. There's not a lot of trees. You see a few of them. So there's not a lot of water. There's not a lot of trees. And if there's not a lot of trees, there's not a lot of timber, not a lot of wood. So this makes it difficult for people to move there to farm, to live, to have these structures that they had in other cities like in the east. And they're going to rely on shipping a lot more, which they might be able to get supplies through the railroads and such, but they have to develop those. So the question, though, becomes, what are these new Americans' homes going to look like when they move to the frontier? So they come here in a wagon, or they get off the railroad that's built later on, and they get off. What are they going to do? There's not a lot of wood. There's not a lot of resources. They have to figure a way. So here's what their home's going to look like. This basically is hay. It's grass. It's what we're going to call sod, which I'll tell you about in a second. But do you see a lot of wood in this picture? Not really. There's a door right here that's probably made out of wood. I think that's a cat right there. But for the most part, it's this grassy stuff. So they're literally going to take apart the ground and create homes out of it. Some homes will look a little different. This one's literally kind of built into a tiny little hill right here, using the environment for their own benefit. But you see, they don't have a door right here. They don't have a wall right here. Literally, they don't have something to cover it up, which they would likely need wood to do so. This one, the grass is literally growing on top of the home as we're going through. And you do have a little wood here on the window, on the door, but for the most part, because of the lack of resources in the Great Plains, they have to build their homes out of what we call sod. And these are what we're going to call sod homes or sod houses in the Great Plains. And they're going to be widespread all over the place in the late 1800s. So all sod is, and you could actually buy sod today if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or garden store. Sod is literally just pieces of the ground, pieces of that grassland out there that are cut out of the land, and you usually use them to just plant back in your yard to help it grow. But in this case, you would just cut out pieces of the land and use it to create your walls, your roof, your shelter that you have there. So this is life. Because there weren't a lot of natural resources that they could use, they had to adapt to their environment, and that means use what's most widespread, which was the grass, the sod. Now let's get to the Homestead Act. And I made a little mistake, so we'll look at this in just a second. So this is the big part. Make sure you know this part. So the Homestead Act is going to be what is going to encourage Americans to move west. So the government's going to be like, how are we going to get these people to leave the city and go west? We have to promise them something. We have to give them something. So what we're going to do is the United States government is going to create this program called the Homestead Act, which is going to encourage those Americans to move west by giving them 160 acres of free land. That's bigger than a football field. So they're going to say, we need you to go west. Go move there, start your life there, and to do that, we'll give you this giant piece of land. Well, that sounds great, but you got to realize it's dry, it's hot, the ground's kind of infertile, it's hard to grow things. And if you have this big piece of land, what are you going to do on that land? You're probably going to have to farm. You're probably going to have to grow something. So, in addition to just getting, well, here's the thing. The land's not 100% free. It's free in terms of money, but you have to do a few things. So to keep the land, as I already had put here, you got to build that sod house, and that's easier said than done. It's made out of grass, right? You got to cultivate, which means improve, and clear that land. So clear it all up and cultivate it. Make sure, work on that soil. Make sure you improve that ground so it's actually capable of growing crops on. Again, that's hard to do. It's dry, it's hot, there's not a lot of natural resources. And on top of that, you got to live there for 5 years. If you can't achieve that, you don't get the free land. So Americans are going to use new tools, things like the steel plow that you see here in a more modern day picture that kind of goes through the soil, breaks it up, allows it to become more fertile over time. And lots of Americans are going to take advantage. So was the Homestead Act successful? Definitely. Here's an actual certificate of homestead that someone's going to get. And ultimately, 4 million people are going to take advantage of that Homestead Act, which means millions of people are going to get free land out there in the Great Plains. And in addition to that, they're going to help clear that land, help cultivate it, improve it, so the Great Plains is going to improve, and they're going to get that free land. But while that happens, like we talked about last time, Native Americans are going to have conflict as we disrupt their life and hurt them and hurt their food supply, which is the buffalo, which is going to force us to try to assimilate them, make them more like us with the Dawes Act. And that's all on the previous video. All right, that's been the Homestead Act. Hope you learned something. We'll see you next time. Thanks.